Hi, I'm Logan Preshaw, a concept artist and illustrator based in Australia, and in this two-part video tutorial series, I'll be stepping through the process that I used to create this illustration of Tails from the Sonic franchise. My original Sonic design had blown up quite a bit on Instagram and Facebook and the like, and I thought, okay, cool, I might as well use this chance to make at least one more and maybe record the process and use it as a tutorial series to sort of show my people some process, since I'd had quite a few requests for people to see how I created my works. So this will be a short two-part series. The first part will look quite different from the end result, and the main reason for that is because I decided to restart the painting about midway because I just wasn't happy with where it was going. I thought it would be worth including that part of the process so that people saw the mistakes that were being made, and I felt like leaving that out might give a misleading impression of how the artwork actually went. I think when you watch a tutorial, you want to see everything that goes on, so I've included all the mishaps and mistakes in this. So through this part one, I'll be discussing quite a bit about mistakes and why they're necessary and how to learn from them, because you make mistakes along the entire learning process. So even when you're a professional and you know what you're doing and you've done plenty of paintings before, you still make mistakes. You still need to restart artworks, or fix things and sort of back yourself out of dead end alleys that you've walked yourself into with artworks. That happens a lot. It happens a lot as a beginner as well, and I think that people can sometimes have an unrealistic expectation around their work and that they need to get everything right on the first go, and that's just simply not the case. The hope is that when you make a mistake, you wouldn't have to restart the artwork, but sometimes that's entirely necessary. And these sorts of mistakes are all part of the natural learning process. So if you do make a mistake, the most important thing is that you learn from it and you analyze why you made that mistake. And in this case, I think I sort of realized that I wasn't trying my best, I was rushing my way through it. And I felt the pressure of having a recording. So, recording yourself when you're creating an artwork can actually create a lot of additional pressure that you don't account for. And I think I underestimated it and just worked half mindedly on the artwork where I needed my full focus on it. The second attempt was a lot better, and I dealt with the pressure of being recorded a lot better. But you can't escape that thought that, oh man, I'm being recorded, and any mistakes that I make, people are going to see. People may judge me for mucking up or whatever, but that's all part of it. I think it's important to keep that in tutorials so that people see that it's very natural to make a mistake or to work slowly or to hesitate. I think a really important aspect of creating artwork that a lot of beginners kind of have trouble with is killing your darlings, so to say. So if you've created an artwork and it's causing more trouble than good, so if you're deep into it and it just doesn't feel right, or there's fundamental issues with proportions or perspective or color work, sometimes it's actually better to just completely restart the painting, go from scratch and fix those errors from the very beginning rather than working into it endlessly trying to fix the problems. That's the realization I sort of came to when I was working on this, was the pose, the color work, the lighting, everything just wasn't working together. I made fundamental mistakes in the proportions that I managed to fix in the second part. Although the mistakes were fundamental, I still tried my best in trying to rectify them. And one thing that came in really useful in that way was saving things as versions. So when I work, I tend to save my work as various versions, like version 1, version 2, version 3, across different stages of the process. And what that means is that essentially I can go back and grab parts and rework them if I've made a mistake later on, or if I want to take something in a new direction and I like where the painting was earlier, then I can go back and start working from there. As you might have seen there, I actually went to one of the versions of my Sonic painting and grabbed the background because I still had those layered files. I could go in and grab those assets and use it in this case because I wanted to have a bit of consistency between the two images. Throughout the process of creating this artwork, there's quite a few times that I reference back to the original Sonic artwork, whether I'm referencing colors or grabbing assets from it. I think that's an essential thing when you're a digital artist, especially if you're working in production. You need to make the most of the digital tools that you're afforded. So if you have the ability to save time by going and grabbing already pre-created assets and using those in your current artwork, it's worth doing that because it's saving you time and everybody else is doing it as well. It's not one of those things where you're cheating if you do that, and I think some people tend to see working digitally as cheating sometimes, or they tend to feel like it's not coming truly from them, And I used to struggle quite a bit with that when I was a beginner, but eventually I just moved on from that once I realized that the end result was far more important than the way in which you got there. People can usually tell if you cheat. If you're using somebody else's work or if you're photo bashing the heck out of something when you should be painting it. I'm not saying that photo bashing is inherently bad, but if you're photo bashing something when you should be painting it, then, people can usually tell. I should mention that I'm cutting some less than essential parts out of this video to shorten the time. Just simple things like lassoing the base color fill and then filling in the basic colors, and that's pretty much all that I've cut. They're really not important things. If you're wondering what I've done there, I've literally just grabbed the lasso tool and circled around the borders of the drawing and filled those in. Although I didn't record the original Sonic artwork, I recorded this video mainly because the original Sonic work got quite a bit of attention on my social media platforms, and a lot of people expressed interest in my process, so I thought this might be a really good chance to talk about my working methods. I'll talk about that a little bit more in part 2, but in part 1 I just want to go through some basic mindset type things that I try to keep in mind whenever I'm working. One thing that's very important to me, and I think is important for many artists in terms of process, is finding a working method that's comfortable for you. So when I work with characters and environments, I tend to work in a way that I know is reliable and that I've used over a number of years. And I know that as a beginner, it's very tempting to stretch out and do as much as you possibly can. Work in as many different methods as you can, and generally try to be good at everything and learn all the fundamentals. At least that was my attitude when I was a beginner. Was I kind of spread myself out a little bit too thin, didn't have a central pivot point or a central style that I could grow out of. And now that I've started sort of zoning in a little bit more on my own approach and my own style, I understand the value of having that there. So especially if you're learning, once you get up to a certain stage where your fundamentals are fairly refined and you know what you're doing, I think it's worth establishing like a central process or technique that is very comfortable for you and that you can grow from. But the essential part there is growing from it. So it's very easy to plateau or become complacent with your style and not really branch out beyond subjects that you're very, very familiar with, and that can stunt growth. If you're comfortable with what you do and you really enjoy, say if you do like anime girls or if you just draw foxes or something, and that's your whole thing, and you're okay with doing that for the rest of your life, that's totally cool. You can do that. But the requirements of the professional industry, though, usually require a bit more flexibility and generalization. So if you can make that kind of thing work for you, and you can build an audience around that and earn a good deal of money around that, and that's what you want to do, that's totally fine. But if you're trying to make your way into concept art or illustration or be a renowned professional, not having a limited skill set will usually work in your benefit. I think a really good way to strike a balance between having a central, personal, and individual style while also constantly improving and learning things is to establish that sort of central approach and then pivot from that whenever you want to learn something new. This just means that you'll have a time and effort efficient process at the center of your entire painting approach while also adding things onto that larger mass. So if you go and you stretch out and start learning new things, you'll just be adding on to existing knowledge rather than feeling like you're jumping between subjects and not really having a solid ground. Having that central and comfortable working method will be great for your confidence, and you'll have a means as to create good artworks without constantly having to put yourself under the pressure of trying something new. You can stretch out and try some new things here and there, such as, oh, today I'm going to try and level up my perspective, or today maybe I'll draw some animals or subjects that I don't usually paint. But if you paint them in a way that's familiar to you and comfortable to you, then it's easier to focus on the things you're trying to learn rather than trying to learn everything at once. I'll interrupt these thoughts briefly just to mention that at this point I kind of realize that the artwork isn't going the way that I want to, and I pretty much restart it. I go back to one of the earlier stages of the painting, start working over the line work again, and trying to fix up the face and the hands. And one of the big reasons for focusing on these areas is that's kind of the first thing that people see when they see a character. Is if you think about how you communicate with someone, the areas you'll focus on the most tend to be the face and the hands. So in painting, if you get those wrong, people immediately notice. I just kept getting the sense that there was something wrong with the general gesture. In the end, it was easier to just go restart and do a whole new pose altogether, but I struggled for a little bit trying to work into it and trying to save the piece. At this point, it may have been easier to just completely restart the thing, and that's a self-realization that I think a lot of people need to make. Is if you're coming across problems, really question whether or not you should restart this. If you finish this artwork and you have the time to restart it, is it going to be the best attempt that you can do? I'm happy with the end result of this painting, like the one that is at the end of part two, because I was happy that that was the best that I could do with it. I felt like there were some parts that could have been done better, absolutely, but at the same time, I didn't feel bad about the effort I put in because I felt like I was doing my best. I knew that if I finished off this version of it, I wouldn't be happy with it because I could do better. This was all just a result of trying to rush through it, and also a result of the pressure of being recorded and not really thinking through my decisions. But coming back to the talk about approach and style and process, my process is kind of a mix of my favorite artists. So I have a number of artists on Artstation and Instagram and all sorts of stuff that I like to reference back to, whose work I absolutely love, and a number of artists whose work I've loved through a number of years, and those have just accumulated into influences for me. I find that I've looked at their work and tried to identify things that I really liked in them, and then tried to absorb those aspects into my style. And anything that I didn't like, I just didn't pay any attention to. And I think that's a fairly good method of learning and establishing your own style, is kind of looking at artists that you really love and looking at what you really love about it and dissecting that and then trying to involve that in your own style. Eventually, over time, hopefully, you become the amalgamation of all of the things that you love in artwork. And I don't think I'm there yet, but I feel like I'm getting there, getting closer to that goal every day. And it feels really good. I think that's a fairly good way to tackle it. At this point, I pretty much figure out that this artwork isn't going the way that I want to, and I close the document, start again. So please tune in to part two, and I hope that you got something out of the thoughts in this video, and there'll be more thoughts on my process and how I work in the second part. Thanks for watching.